are live on Facebook and recording.
All right, I now call the June 23rd, 2020 remote meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education to order. All board members are participating by simultaneous communication. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Board members, please unmute your microphones at this time. As I call your name, please say present. Board Member Rhonda Cheek.
Present.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones. Board Member Carol Sawyer.
Present.
Board Member Margaret Marshall.
Present.
Board Member Sean Strain.
Present.
Board Member Lenora Shipp.
Present.
Board Member Jennifer Delahara.
Present.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers Bailey.
Present.
Board Chair Elise Dashew.
Present.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum with 8 members present.
All right. I know Dr. Jones will be with us any moment. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, with a motion from Ms. Byers Bailey, a second from Ms. Sawyer. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands and say yes.
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 Yes. Do we have any opposed? Okay, Madam Clerk, the agenda is adopted by a unanimous vote of 8-0. All right. So we have a board statement that Lenora Shipp is going, or at-large Representative Lenora Shipp is going to read on behalf of the Board of Education. So I now turn to Board Member Lenora Shipp for this item.
Thank you, Chairperson Dashew. We, the 9 members of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, stand with our superintendent in his call to dismantle biases, bigotry, and racism. Now is the moment for all of us in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools to work together to reduce the inequities, opportunity gaps, and racial divides that are so pervasive. We must promote belonging and inclusiveness to build an environment where all children can and do exceed. The COVID-19 pandemic and the social unrest following the death of George Floyd has combined to become a pivotal moment in our nation. It is a moment to listen attentively and let our actions speak for us. Words are not enough. Now is the time to fight actively and comprehensively against racism so that our children feel safe and nurtured, and unconditional love for one another is valued. We can do better, and we must do better in creating the schools that our children need and deserve. We commit to do the challenging, uncomfortable work to improve the culture and climate of our schools, which shapes the social, emotional, physical, and mental development of our scholars. We will provide an environment that nurtures high levels of teaching and learning, improving academic achievement for all. We vow to lift up those who need it the most, to work the hardest where the opportunity gaps are the greatest. We believe that we can emerge from this period of uncertainty with the resolve to embrace new approaches and promote sustainable change. This change will be a process, not a single event. We embrace our tremendous responsibility to provide all of our students with the quality of education that shapes their lives. We embrace our more imperative to empower students to become productive contributors with the needed skills to lead the way in supporting their communities, country, and the world. We have been given an opportunity to recommit and to reset, and we embrace this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to thank Lenora Shipp as well as Jennifer De La Hara for spearheading and crafting that statement. And thank you to all 9 board members for signing on to that commitment. A commitment statement must be followed with action. And for our first action following this commitment statement, we're going to initiate the process to rename Zebulon B. Vance High School. And I turn to the superintendent to explain this process. Mr. Winston.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. CMS takes very seriously our obligation to educate all students who attend our schools, and we consider it an important priority to make sure we offer a learning environment in which all of our students feel comfortable, welcome, and cared for. As part of our efforts to provide equitable educational opportunities, CMS has launched a process to review school names and to rename schools that many in our community say glorify a racist, hateful, and painful past. The Board of Education has directed staff to begin the process of changing the name of Zebulon B. Vance High School. Vance owned slaves and as governor of North Carolina spoke out against and fought anti-discrimination laws and other protections for racial minorities. His is not the example we want to project for our students, families, and staff. District staff will move forward with a full review of all school names and recommend moving forward with a process to rename all schools named after individuals who owned slaves or promoted slavery, expressed racist or bigoted views, actively fought against equality, or otherwise demonstrated values counter to those which CMS are committed. We know changing the school's name is largely symbolic, but it is an important step in the right direction. We also plan to share at next month's Board of Education meeting later in July that some specific examples of actions the district is taking to create more equitable outcomes for all students. We look forward to sharing that information with board members and members of our public at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to have a Title I presentation, and I turn this back to you, Mr. Superintendent, for the report on Title I.
Thank you again, Madam Chair and board members. This evening, our Chief Academic Officer, Brian Kingsley, and Executive Director of Federal Programs, Kelly Price, will provide an overview of our 2020-2021 Title I application. Board members, as you know, Title I is a federal entitlement program that gives funds to schools and other district programs in need. It is important that we continue to use these dollars in a meaningful way in order to more deeply engage our community and provide equitable access to instructional opportunities across our district. And with that, I would like to turn to Brian and Kelly to provide you the details of our Title I application for next year.
Thank you, Superintendent Winston. Good evening, board. It's nice to see all of you this evening. Prior to Kelly coming on and sharing his screen regarding this evening's presentation, just a overview. Tonight will be an overview of our anticipated Title I planning allotment for the 2020-2021 school year. It will highlight and elevate changes that we are anticipating, and it will give a deep explanation around how these allotments are distributed around key tenets that make up our Title I federal programs, such as parent and community engagement, pre-K services, professional development, monies that are designated for private schools, as well as specialized populations and other direct allotments that go to schools, that school principals work with their specific school leadership team, the school improvement planning process in their respective school communities to make and develop plans that are in the best interest of those schools. Kelly Price is an outstanding executive director for federal programs, and he's going to take us through the presentation at this time.
Good evening, members of the board, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Superintendent. I do have a quick question. Do I need to share my screen, or is the presentation going to be put up by the board?
Probably easiest to share your screen, Kelly.
All right, give me one moment. I apologize. Can everyone see the application cover page?
Yes.
Okay,
I
good.
see it.
Again, thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. Before I start, I do have my directors on deck in case there are any other questions we may not be able to answer. I do want to thank my team. I have three wonderful directors, Allison Whitaker, Tanisha Manus, and Dr. Fanish Shaw, who work with our schools and programs. Under them, we have several specialists, budget assistants, and my office manager, who help keep everything running behind the scenes, and they do not get enough credit for the work that they do. And so they are all part of this application that we're sharing this evening and all part of this process. So I do want to give them kudos as well. As we look at our planning forward to the 2021 school year, you will see on your slide that we had a planning allotment last year of roughly $40.3 million. We were fortunate this year, despite a census poverty decrease of about 1.1%, to still receive additional funding in our initial planning allotment of a little over $3 million. As you know, in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, we use community eligibility provision data, which is a federal meal-based program to collect poverty data from our schools, because schools that use the CEP program to provide free breakfast and lunch to their students do not collect meal-based applications, and so we do not use free and reduced lunch data for that reason. In the 1920 school year, we served schools at a multiplied percentage of 59.2%. We are recommending for the upcoming school year that we decrease our served poverty percentage to 53.33% with the multiplier. The multiplier is a meal multiplier. It is part of the meal program, and it is primarily intended for us to capture families who would either not be eligible for federal assistance, or for families who choose not to participate in federal assistance such as SNAP or TANF, even though they are available. In lowering the poverty percentage, we are able to keep more Title I schools in status rather than putting them in a grandfather status where they would potentially exit in the 2021-22 school year. On the next slide, you can see a breakdown of our schools. We would have 83 Title I schools under this scenario. We have one neglected and delinquent facility. You'll hear more about that in a moment. That is a federal term. That's not a term that we like or like to use. So we just refer to it as the school at Thompson. And then we do have 13 private schools whose students that would normally attend Title I public schools are eligible to participate, and you'll hear a little bit more about those in just a moment as well. And you can see there are some new private schools in Mecklenburg County who have chosen to participate for the 2021 school year. I am required by law to put a list of all of the schools into the presentation. I know that it's rather small, but that list will be posted online on our internal and external website and provided to the board members. However, highlighting changes to that list from last year, we have several current CMS schools that will be joining the Title I family. Elizabeth Traditional Elementary School has never been Title I, and they will join the Title I family next year. We are very pleased that Governor's Village Upper Campus will be joining Title I. This allows Principal Garcia to join both of her campuses, as she has already done with her staff and families, in a financial way in order to serve everyone using Title I dollars. Metro School is rejoining Title I status after a 2-year hiatus, as well as Reedy Creek Elementary School. Huntingtown Farms, because it falls below our current proposed served poverty threshold, will move into grandfather status. For next year, they will still receive a full allotment of funds, but will transition out of Title I status if they do not meet our served poverty threshold in the 2021-22 school year. And last year, Quail Hollow Middle School was in the status that I just mentioned, grandfather status. They did not meet our served poverty threshold for the upcoming year, and they will exit status as of July 1. For parent and family engagement, we are required by law, this is a required set aside, we are required to set aside 1% of our planning allotment for activities to encourage and promote family engagement and community outreach. Of that 1%, we are required to allot 90% of that directly to the schools for them to provide services to their families. This amount at the top of your slide represents an amount that is higher than 1%, because we do allocate the 1% and the 90% to schools. But in addition, as I mentioned earlier when I introduced my directors, we do have a director of Title I Family Engagement and Community Outreach who joined our team this year, Dr. Fani Shaw, and her specialist, Robert Bromwell. So those are part of the costs that you see related to our family engagement and community outreach initiatives. In pre-kindergarten, you will see that we will be serving 119 classrooms next year. This is an increase of 5 classrooms over the 1920 school year. The change in the number of students, it brings us up to serving a little over 2,000 students at 2,142 students, and at a cost of $15.7 million for the teachers, the teacher assistants in those classrooms, and central office staff who support those classrooms. And those include literacy facilitators, translators and interpreters for families and students, and then an assistant director who helps us manage all of the operational pieces of the Title I pre-K and helps to keep us in compliance. In addition, you'll see 2 amounts at the bottom of the slide. One is for training for the upcoming year, for the summer months in the upcoming year, to help our pre-K staff work with our youngest learners in potentially a hybrid or remote learning environment should the COVID pandemic require that. Indirect cost is an amount that the school district, a percentage that's set by the state that the district is allowed to take for indirect operational costs, such as facilities, air conditioning, phones, things that you don't typically purchase out of a grant budget. Private schools, as I mentioned earlier, we have 13 private schools. Of those 13 schools, there are 146 students who would have normally attended a Title I school who are eligible for services. And there is a 3-pronged approach to determining eligibility. The first is that they must have normally attended a Title I school. Second, after they meet that first threshold criteria, they must meet our served poverty threshold. And then the third criteria is that after they've met that criteria, those first two criteria, they must also demonstrate an academic need. And so from all of our participating schools, in parentheses, you can see the number of students who are eligible for services for next year. Professional development set aside is primarily designed to support our teachers who are new to the district and new to the profession, and those who have 0 to 3 years of experience. Although our new teacher support coordinators who are funded out of this set aside also do work with teachers who are in their 4th year as well. And each of these coordinators works out of our teacher professional learning department, and they have a cohort of Title I schools that they work with, and they work directly with their supervisor, Renee Goals, and our principals to determine the best supports for the new teachers, whether they be one-on-one supports, group support, and in addition, they offer a beginning teacher academy at the beginning of each year And then they also have a new teacher academy at the end of the year to close out the year as well. We have 2 designations of schools in Title I, in the Title I world under the Every Student Succeeds Act. The first is targeted support and improvement schools. These schools may be Title I or non-Title I schools. Schools that receive a TSI designation do not receive any additional funding, federal funding, because of their designation. Their designation indicates that they have a subgroup of students or multiple subgroups who have an F performance grade. We have 99 schools that are currently in this status, and they remain in status for 3 years with district support to help them move out of status at the end of the 3-year period. Of those 99 schools, we looked at schools that had the highest number of homeless students, and we provisioned 5 social workers to the schools that you see on the screen. All of our McKinney-Vento or homeless data that you will see on this slide and the next 2 slides is as of June the 10th of this year. In addition, we are required by law for all TSI schools that are on this slide and CSI schools that will be on the upcoming slide are required to use an online school improvement planning platform. In North Carolina, that platform is NC STAR. We are required to have a person or persons who attend the school improvement team meetings for those schools and who monitor their school improvement plans at the district level. And so we have a specialist who does that work, and she is housed in our department, and she is split half between this set aside and the next set aside. In our next set aside, we have comprehensive support and improvement schools. This is a designation that is only for Title I schools. In Charlotte-Mecklenburg, we have 10 schools that meet this status. These schools are either in status because they have they are in low performing status with the state of North Carolina, or they have a graduation rate below 66%. And in parentheses, you can see the rationale or reason why each of these schools is in CSI status. You will also see an indication in blue for those schools that are finalizing, they're coming into their last year of a federal school improvement grant. And then you will see Charlotte-Mecklenburg Academy highlighted. We recently announced to board through the board update that they had received a 3-year, $1.5 million innovative partnership grant, which is a federal grant for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Academy. So we're very happy about that. And again, you will see the other half of that specialist who works with them on the NC STAR platform. In our homeless set aside, it is not required, but it is recommended that we set aside a minimum of 1% of our planning allotment, similar to family engagement, to serve homeless students in the district. It should be noted that this set aside is the only set aside where Title I and non-Title I schools can be served with Title I dollars. And so you will see that we have selected the 3 high schools that have the highest number of homeless students in the district to receive a McKinney-Vento or homeless social worker. And those are Myers Park, Vance, and West Mecklenburg. In addition, we are required as a district to have a homeless liaison, and we fund that from this set aside as well. We provide students under the age of 12 who are McKinney-Vento or homeless with access to our after-school enrichment programming services when those are active outside of the COVID pandemic. This summer, we are providing a small portion of our population of 4,342 students who are currently deemed homeless in our district with access to Freedom School opportunities and Oasis Foundation summer opportunities in Charlotte. For foster care, for those of you who are not familiar, foster care used to fall, foster students who are waiting on or who are currently in foster care were previously deemed homeless. Under the revision of the law, they pulled foster care students out. However, foster care students are still eligible to receive services. And so we do provide services to our children who are in foster care if their families choose those services in the same manner that we provide those to our McKinney-Vento or our homeless students. We do note that there are only 10 students here listed on this slide. We do have more students than that who are either awaiting or who are currently in foster care, but this is the number of families on average annually who request services, and those families who do not generally either have a family network or have a private network of after-school care and before-school care that they provide for their foster child. We recognize in the district that we have more than 200 languages spoken in our district, and therefore we have a large number of students who are English language learners. This is an optional set aside, but we acknowledge that a large number of those students are in our Title I schools. We have 2 English language learner coordinating teachers who provide support directly to our Title I schools with large populations of English language learner students, and in particular to teachers who are new to teaching those students. In addition, we have 4 district interpreters at who provide services to our schools. They either do oral interpretation or written translation. For the upcoming year, we will also be providing a contract which is supplemental to the services that the district already provides through an outside provider in order to provide our Title I schools with additional real-time access to both interpretation and translation when timing does not allow for them to pre-plan for an interpreter to be on site. They will be able to call in for that service. Neglected and delinquent, again, as I mentioned, this is a federal term that is built into the law. We serve the school at Thompson. The amount that is allocated out of our Title I is set by a head count that is submitted by Thompson in October of each year, and the amount is given to us by DPI. However, I will note for you all this year that last year they were eligible to serve only 24 students, and Thompson added a high school program, and so they are eligible to serve up to 33 students. So we do anticipate that this allotment may increase slightly as we enter August and the new school year. Kelly Education Services, no relationship to Kelly Price, who is presenting tonight, is a service that provides temporary employees to businesses and nonprofits. We contracted with them in the current school year to provide our current 80 Title I schools with substitutes. And so with these funds, they do all of the recruiting, hiring, background checks, and training for substitutes who go into our Title I schools. This year, we were happy that Kelly Services was able to meet a fill rate of 87% of all substitutes that were needed in Title I schools. Our goal was 90%, but that is an increase from 40 to 45% in the year prior to us implementing Kelly Services. Our contract with Kelly Services will be contingent for 1 additional year on being able to try to meet the 90% fill rate that was our expectation this year, and also have some increased customer satisfaction from our schools, both in their customer service to principals and the quality of the substitutes that they provide. District administration, we are allowed to take or utilize up to 12% of the planning allotment for the administration of the Title I program in the district. As you can see from this slide, we use approximately 9.37%. The staff that are funded by this district administrative set aside are on the left side of your slide. Those include folks in my department. My position is a quarter funded out of Title I because I spend at least a quarter or more of my time working on Title I initiatives. And then our office supervisor, Christy Hancock, who I mentioned earlier. My two directors who work directly with schools, you'll find here, a budget assistant, Stephanie Rome, a senior administrative assistant, Sandra Polk, our budget analyst, Elisa Jones, and our 2 program specialists that work with schools, Sharon Fink and Denise Cyrus. Other district staff that we support are in the Central Learning Community 1 learning community, and that is the learning community superintendent, 2 executive directors, and 1 community coordinator. To your right in the blue dotted box, you will see the cost of the salary and benefits for those individuals. In addition, that indirect cost rate comes up again. You saw it on the pre-K slide. Those are for indirect, non-purchased services that the district incurs for administering Title I programs. Unemployment costs are for any employee who was previously funded under the grant in a prior fiscal year, and we receive that bill annually from the state, and this is the average cost for that. We do have employees who are not on the teacher pay scale who are still eligible for longevity, and so we do pay those costs as well. Each one of our 83 schools next year and our 80 schools this year will have a compliance contact. That person could be anyone from the principal to the senior administrative assistant or a teacher, and they receive a stipend based on completing all of the compliance requirements in a year that are supplemental to their regular and normal duties. And then there are operational costs listed here, which include everything that you could imagine, from mileage reimbursement, mobile phones, technology, computing, copying, printing, binding, mailing that we're required to do for federal compliance is all included in those operational costs. At the request of board members, we sought to raise the amount of funding that we were providing to Title I schools. So with the increase in allotment and the increase in the number of schools last year and the prior year, we gave $18.5 million to our Title I schools. And this next coming year, we will be able to allot $19 million to our schools. Also, at the request of board members, we have included this slide this year. It is new, but for informational purposes, the most common Title I school-based expenditures. So what do our schools most typically spend their dollars on? The first bullet highlights the top 6 positions that are generally chosen by our schools, but our schools are not just limited to those positions. The only positions they cannot use Title I dollars to fund are administrative positions or administrative support positions in their school. All instructional or instructional related positions are allowable. And so you can see those listed here. Also included is professional learning opportunities for staff and teachers at the school, tutorial services for students, supplemental instructional materials and supplies to what the district already provides, parent and family engagement, curriculum-based activities, which you saw from the set aside from the other slide around parent and family engagement, and then other activities as required by law to assist students with transitions between respective grade spans. And at this time, I'll take any questions from the board and just I'm available.
All right. Who has a question?
Madam Chair, can I just share one? I just want to remind board members that this item will appear again later on the agenda as the first action item. So we will be actually seeking board approval later in the agenda. Thank you.
All right. And I see Dr. Jones has a question. Oh, you're muted, Dr. Jones.
Mute now. Can you
There
hear
you go.
me?
Yeah,
Yes,
you're good.
ma'am.
Okay. Just for my education, explain a little bit between personalized learning and differentiation of instruction.
Personalized learning would be to create a personalized education plan for an individual child that may take a formal, that may be in a formal document if a student requires, for example, an IEP or a PEP by law. And differentiation of instruction applies to the entire classroom. So a teacher would obviously know whether any of her students have an IEP, which is required under our exceptional children's programs, or a PEP, but differentiation of instruction is also the acknowledgement that all children learn differently. And so it is organizing instruction in a way that meets the needs of individual children and their learning styles, also acknowledging where they are in their learning process, although they all may be in the same grade, in the same classroom. Some of our students may be below grade level, at grade level, or above grade level. We also have to take into consideration our academically gifted students, and we are allowed to serve them as well under Title I funds with Title I school-based funds.
Kelly, could I
Okay.
ask you to take your screen down so that we can see the whole gallery of faces? That'll help
Yes,
me
ma'am.
keep track
Sorry.
of who's asking. No problem.
And a question, I said I had 3. Kelly Services, I often get questions about Kelly Services and are they effective? How do we evaluate the effectiveness other than having that expectation that they get a 90% participation rate?
We do have members of our human resources staff who are responsible for the execution of the Kelly Services Initiative. And one of my directors, Allison Whitaker, is our primary point person. I participate as well. Kelly Services meets with us on a regular basis. They have staff who actually do walkthroughs, especially in schools where there may be a concern about a particular substitute or substitutes. My directors also, we have access to the Frontline platform in which schools enter absences. And so we are able to see on a daily basis substitutes who are daily subs, substitutes who are long-term subs, either because of an absence or because of a long-term leave, such as an FMLA related leave, a Family Medical Leave Act leave, such as pregnancy or family death or illness or personal illness. And so my team members also, we go out and talk with school principals and leaders who are responsible for assigning substitutes in schools to get feedback. And then Kelly Services, we do have a mid-year survey and we have an end-of-year survey from our principal stakeholders. It is anonymous unless they choose to give their name and their school name, so that they can feel free to give us all the feedback that they need. And so those are the measures that we currently have in place.
And you usually get pretty good report?
Our feedback this year was probably, I would say, 90% positive. We did have concerns, as I mentioned in the slide, about the customer service from the Kelly Service business side, because they transitioned from serving 14 Beacon schools in the prior year to 80 Title I schools, all 80 Title I schools this year. And so it was a managerial staffing issue. So they are aware of that and are working on that. And then the other was the quality of some of the substitutes who came into some of the buildings. But Kelly Services is very responsive to principals about not reassigning a substitute for which there's a concern. They pull the sub, they make an assessment. They may do some retraining if the substitute can be reassigned to another school where there's a better fit, then the sub is reassigned. Or if the sub is not a good fit for education or our Title I school setting, then they don't continue employment with Kelly Services.
Okay, so you do try, what I think I'm hearing is that you do try to keep a consistent staff, say at Eastway, which in the past typically might have a significant number of absent teachers out.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that Kelly staff is one that knows that school and the population and is repeatedly utilized there.
Yes, ma'am.
Am I correct? Okay, my last question. Family school advocates,
Yes, ma'am.
what does their work entail?
There is a job description for family school advocates. Some of our family school advocates, first of all, let me state that every school does not have a family school advocate. Every school has someone who is designated as their family and community contact. A Title I school may opt with their Title I dollars to hire a family school advocate or use an ADM exchange, a position exchange that's provided through state or local dollars to create that position. Their primary responsibility, they may be bilingual, so they may do some translation and interpretation, but their primary responsibility is to serve as a liaison between the school, teachers and administrators in particular, and family members. Part of their role is also to reach out and try to find community support, for example, partnerships with businesses or nonprofits who can support the activities of the school, as well as families engaging in leadership roles such as the school improvement team, leadership roles in the PTA or PTO, and then also reaching out and ensuring that we have, they make sure that if they are not bilingual and there are not sufficient interpreters or translators available for a family event, that they work with our EL department to ensure that folks are available for those events. And then they also work with our school leaders and teachers to plan activities based on family feedback about what they need to most help their children at home and what they most need to understand the academic standards for a particular grade level for their children.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Shipp?
I'm just gonna compliment what I've seen. Kelly, Mr. Price, this is good because there's been a lot of needs with Title I. Being a Title I administrator for many years, I'm glad to see some of these things evolving and some change to the needs for Title I schools. As Dr. Jones mentioned, that family school advocate is, to me, one of the most important positions in the school that you should select with Title I funds, because when we talk about the homeschool connection, those compacts, and you know about those, Kelly, how important, and family engagement, that is a critical position to the school when you talk about a Title I school with the needs that they have. So that's, to me, one of the main positions that you really want to consider. And I know it's been looked at optional, but it is a leading position. And also the PEPs, I'm glad to see we're still looking at those. There was a time they were required to have a PEP, a personal educational plan for all of our students, and that is different from differentiated instruction. I think that was mentioned. So are those being really looked at in terms of when we come to the end of the year, especially, and we're talking about students that really need more? Are those PEPs being looked at, required to be put in place in the Title I schools now?
I don't have direct supervision over that process. When I refer to PEPs, I'm primarily talking about the IEPs that are required for our EC students and our 504 plans for those students who don't meet EC requirements, but also require a plan. I can't speak to PEPs for every student in every Title I school.
Right.
Kelly,
Okay.
in the board, the PEP process has been replaced with intervention plans
Yeah.
at the school-based level, and they are monitored closely through the Office of School Performance at the principal level and with our learning superintendents.
Thank you, because that's what I wondered, had there been a shift from the PEP to the intervention type process?
Yes,
Thank you.
Every year, our schools, and Brian can speak to this, they're required to complete a report about those interventions at the end of the year. And we are actually working to merge, we're working with that team to merge our Title I end of the year report with that report. So schools have one comprehensive report about their progress and about their students and their needs, so that their planning forward for the next school year is a whole picture of their school rather than a fragmented or segmented picture of their school.
Anyone else? Mr. Shul?
I see under the Thompson School homelessness and under private schools, one of the main allotments is tutorial assistance. Could you elaborate a little bit on what that entails and how effective it is?
Yes, for the school at Thompson, students are transitional. So they may remain for a few days at Thompson, or they may remain for several weeks or several months at Thompson, depending on the severity of their abuse and neglect and their need. So what we do is we work in collaboration with the education arm of the school at Thompson or the Thompson facility. We look at the needs of each student. We have contracted, Mr. Scholl, with university instructors. They provide certified tutors to go in and work with those students based on their individual needs. So in addition to the regular instruction that those students receive from teachers at the school at Thompson, they receive, many of them are residential at Thompson. They don't come to day school there. They reside at Thompson in a cottage. And so there's the opportunity for before school and after school tutorial that is provided to them through university instructors.
And do we have any data on their performance as a result?
Yes. So this year in particular, we've taken a different tact to how we look at that. So one of the things that we're doing is we're looking at a beginning of year assessment. May not be the same as what we have in the public schools, like a beginning of grade state assessment. We look at those data. We also measure a midpoint and then an endpoint. Our specialist that I mentioned earlier for parent and family engagement, one of his responsibilities, Mr. Robert Bromwell, is to go out and work with Thompson and our private schools to make sure that these tutorial services are being delivered with fidelity. And he also does check the progress monitoring. Once a student reaches once a student reaches or attains a level of proficiency through university instructors through that supplemental tutoring, then they actually can exit out through the year. So they can exit out on a quarterly or semester or at the end of the year and not need services anymore. So we do monitor throughout the year to make sure that those students are improving with those tutorial services. And we do on occasion have to request a different tutor for a different kind of match for the student that they're working with.
Okay. And I had one last question about what kind of feedback are we gathering from teachers about Title I funded professional development?
So Title I funded professional development, as I mentioned earlier, is primarily targeted at our new teachers with 0 to 3 years of experience. And so we do survey all of the teachers that we work with or that our new teacher support coordinators work with. We also survey our principals about the services that we provide. This past year, we did not get to have our end of year event because of the COVID-19. But in the prior year, in June of 2019, out of all of the teacher professional development that we had provided as of June 30th, 2019 for our new teacher population in Title I schools, their beginning teacher academy and their end of year event were the highest rated events for professional learning that we offered in the district. So we know that we're offering a high quality program. We just have a volume issue that we have to address because we have a larger number of newer teachers to the district and the profession in our Title I schools with respect to our other schools that are not Title I.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
May I
Right.
just,
If it's quick, Dr. Jones, because Ms.
It's-
Byers-Bailey
it's-
had her hand up too.
oh, okay, go ahead. I just wanted to make, it appears excellent programs or opportunities there. But as I often get, why aren't our children reading? And so in response, because most of the time it's with my fellow colleagues in education, it's because they aren't reading enough. Think about that. Noodle on that, Mr. Kingsley, because we're going to have a conversation about it. Thank you.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Thank you. I noticed in your report, there was a line item for Title I schools to get funds to help them with their school improvement plans, teams. How have, because I know some of our Title I schools have difficulty getting enough community or family support in order to provide that planning process. How are those funds used, and are they successful in getting the schools to provide that document?
So Ms. Courtney Tate is our specialist for our NC STAR specialist. She primarily works on the technical aspect. She attends the meetings and works on the technical aspect of reviewing the plans for compliance and providing feedback. Our family engagement, so if you look at the family engagement set aside, Dr. Fani Shaw, Robert Bromwell, and then also our locally funded parent and family community outreach or community education team provide those services when needed. So there's a collaboration there with Ms. Tate and that team to look at schools where we have an underrepresentation of parents who are, in particular, parents who are not already staff members at that school, because we're looking for parents and community members who don't have necessarily, who aren't employees of the school district. And so
Right.
they work with them. So in some cases, we do have to go out and work to solicit parent input by using our translation and interpretation team as well. So the last thing I'll highlight is that Dr. Shaw came on board in August, right after school started, and throughout the fall and early winter, we held informational meetings. And so we have begun a parent advisory council that is district level to provide input into Title I planning and services, as well as other district initiatives. And those folks are representative of not only community organizations, but parents and families in our Title I schools. And that is one of the areas that we are targeting for this upcoming year, with some funding set aside to provide training to school administrators and family contacts and teachers on how to engage families in those leadership roles, both on the school improvement team and PTO, PTA, if the school has one of those organizations. So those are all things that I would not say we are at an A-star rating, but we are working towards that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? We'll have more time to discuss when we get to the action item, but thank you. Thank you for your work, Kelly. Especially the family engagement, growing family engagement piece is really promising. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Have Ms. Sawyer come to some of our, and you come to some of our parent advisory council meetings. So that's been very positive for them to see that they have board support, and our superintendent has also come to several of our planning meetings to greet parents and young students. And I think that it's very helpful for them to see district leadership, other than people who are charged with the work, who are invested in the fact that parents will be engaged both in their children's education and at the leadership levels that we request, not require, at the school level. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, that family advisory council it's critical work that they're doing. So we're happy to support it.
Thank you,
All
everyone.
right, thank you. So next on the agenda, we've got the first reading of changes to policy DJ. And I turn to Dr. Ruby Jones, Chair of the Policy Committee, for the first reading of proposed changes to policy DJ, which regards purchasing and contracting.
All right. Madam Chair, tonight is the first reading of the proposed changes to policy DJ, purchasing and contracting. The changes are intended to create consistency in the contract the approval process, and link approval authority to a threshold dollar amount. They are also intended to provide additional oversight by the Board of Education. These changes were approved unanimously by the Policy Committee, and part of that motion was to fast track this policy as the changes being made will ensure efficient operation of our district. Therefore, we will also be having a public hearing and a voting on this policy at tonight's board meeting. With that, Madam Chair, I conclude the first reading of policy DJ.
All right, thank you very much. We will now move on to the consent items portion of the agenda. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent agenda items?
So moved. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Ms. Byers-Bailey, a second from Ms. De La Hara. Before we move to the vote, does any board member wish to pull any part of this item for individual consideration? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hands and say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have any opposed? Okay, Madam Clerk, our consent agenda is approved by a unanimous vote of 9-0. Mr. Superintendent, do you have any personnel appointments that you would like to speak to?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to speak to the personnel appointments momentarily. I would, before I do that, like to highlight the 4 construction projects that were approved momentarily by the board a few moments ago, I should say. And so, Madam Chair and board members, I am actually going to ask Dennis Lacaria to address the 4 construction projects, the contracts that were approved for the next projects in the 2017 bond. In keeping with our commitment to transparency, I'm going to ask Dennis to just briefly walk us through all 4 items. But before Dennis does that, I do want to take a moment to thank the board again for approving these 4 contracts. I'd also like to recognize the work of our CMS Capital staff and the Mecklenburg County Finance staff, as well as support from County Manager Diorio and members of the Board of County Commissioners in revising our capital improvement program to reflect the increases in the cost of construction over the life of the 2017 bond projects. We do believe that a quality learning environment is a foundational element of a quality educational experience. And we'd like to take this opportunity to once again thank the voters of Mecklenburg County for their commitment to our children. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, Madam Chair, members of the board. It's my pleasure to highlight again this evening these 4 projects that we just approved. Thank you for that. Tonight it was just over $67 million worth of work at 4 schools: a replacement school for Briarwood Elementary School, a new elementary school to relieve the overcrowding issues at Nations Ford, Steel Creek, and Sterling Elementaries, an addition and cafeteria expansion at Sharon Elementary School, and a new gym at West Mecklenburg High School, which has been long overdue. Our MWSB participation in every one of these is well over 20%, going to 34.53% at West Mecklenburg High School. All of these projects are scheduled for occupancy in August 2021, but I do want to mention that given current realities, including COVID and the date at which we are approving these because of our need to work through the county's CIP process, we are at risk on some of these for delivery around, the August deadline. So with that, I'll take any questions or take my leave.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I will just add my thanks as well to the voters for supporting the 2017 bond and to our county funding partners for moving forward with with, you know, clearing the way for us to move forward with these next 4 projects. All right, you had some personnel appointments as well, Mr. Winston. And you're muted.
It happens at least once per meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair. As Ms. Kelly adds to our screen the personnel appointments, thank you very much, Ms. Kelly. This, as I have said in the past, is one of my most favorite parts of our board meetings, when I get an opportunity to share new leadership with board members and our public in our district. And so first up is John Klein, who I am happy to say is the new principal at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Virtual High School. Mr. Klein, although he is joining us from Iowa, Cedar Rapids specifically, he is no stranger to the CMS family. And so we want to welcome him back. Prior to leaving CMS, he worked as an assistant principal at South Mecklenburg High School, and he also taught at Myers Park High during 2 different stints, and worked at a few other school districts in North Carolina. We're excited to have Mr. Klein back, and he is joining us this evening, and would like to give Mr. Klein an opportunity briefly to acknowledge anyone that he would like to acknowledge tonight, and just say a few words.
Thank you, Superintendent Winston and the board. I am thrilled to be returning to Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools and to be joining an outstanding team at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Virtual High School in such an exciting and growing space. Ensuring flexibility, personalization, and relationships that prepare students for 21st century citizenship is a mission that I'm thrilled to be invested in. My wife and children will also be returning to CMS, where my wife will be teaching middle school. 2 of my children will be in high school and 1 in middle school. We are pumped to be back in the Queen City and part of the CMS family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Next up, I would like to introduce Paula Cook as the new principal of Cochran Collegiate Academy. Ms. Cook is currently assistant principal at West Charlotte High School, where she has served since 2016. And prior to that, she served as a dean and an academic facilitator at West Charlotte High School. She has also taught in the district at both Independence and Harding University High School. Again, excited to welcome Ms. Cook into this new leadership opportunity. She served very ably as an interim at West Charlotte as we awaited Donovan Hoskins' arrival. And so with that, Ms. Cook has joined us this evening as well, and I'd like to give her an opportunity to share a few brief remarks.
Good evening. I just want to say thank you to the board for this opportunity. My family and I are very excited. I have 3 boys who attend CMS schools. My husband is also very excited, and I just want to again thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to serving Cochran Collegiate Academy. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Next up, as we return to the personnel appointments, next up is Tracy Hager. Ms. Hager is the current principal of, the current assistant principal. I've already promoted her at Mallard Creek Elementary School. She has served also as an assistant principal at Blythe, Mary Oaks, in University Meadows Elementary. She served as a principal intern at University Meadows and also taught at J.W. Greer. She served prior to that as a facilitator and also as a teacher at Devonshire. And so I am excited to announce that Ms. Hager has become the new principal at Lansdowne IB Elementary School. Ms. Hager is also joining us this evening, and I want to invite her to say a few brief remarks.
Good evening, members of the school board, to Ernest Winston, our superintendent. Yes, I am Tracy Hager, and I am overjoyed to be the principal at Lansdowne Elementary School. I definitely want to acknowledge, I have some family and friends on this call, and they have all been part of this journey along with me. I do feel like becoming a principal in this day and time, more than ever, have to lead with the heart. And you truly have a leader at Lansdowne Elementary who's going to lead with passion and with care, and definitely ready to take things to the next level. So thank you again for the opportunity. Looking forward to the partnership with all of you. And you definitely will hear great things at Lansdowne, home of the Lions.
Well, thank you, Ms. Hager. And I will tell you, Ms. Hager's enthusiasm is contagious. I catch a little bit of it every time I visit Mallard Creek Elementary School, and I look forward to doing the same at Lansdowne. Next up, I would like to welcome Troy Moore back into CMS as part of the Team CMS family. Mr. Moore is rejoining us from California, way out west. But prior to leaving for California, Mr. Moore served as the proud principal at Hawk Ridge Elementary School. And prior to that, he was an assistant principal at Hawk Ridge, and also served in some other capacities in Guilford County Public Schools, where he began as a teacher back in 2000. Mr. Moore is the new and proud principal at Starmount Academy of Excellence, and I want to invite him to give a few brief remarks this evening.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Winston. It's so good to see you all and to listen in on your conversations this evening. I am out here in California, but I'm ready to come home. Our family of 5 is so excited to be rejoining CMS. It's one of the greatest districts in the country. I've seen so many of them. And I just want you to know that we are excited to be coming back to our roots and our home. And I could not be more excited about Starmount Academy of Excellence. It was great to meet some of the staff members already and their passion for the school, and what's been going on there since 2015 is really impressive. We look forward to building upon that work. Also, I just have to thank also Dr. Esposito and the Southwest Learning Community. And I have to give a special shout out. He knows I'm probably going to do this. Gabriel Schul is your student ambassador there. He is a former student of mine there at Hawk Ridge Elementary School. Gabriel, well done. You've been a leader since back in elementary school, and it's great to see you in this environment. Please say hi to your parents for me.
Glad to see you back.
Thank you.
Right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Madam Chair, I was just going to thank Mr. Moore and excited to have him back. And Mr. Schul, we know the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So thank you very much. That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
You have one more.
No, yes, that's right. It does not conclude my report. Thank you so much. Thank you. So look, we've been doing a great job moving forward in this meeting.
I'm not ready to forget this one.
Last, but certainly not least, is Jared Thompson. Mr. Thompson is the new and proud principal at Carmel Middle School, where he currently serves as the assistant principal and has done so since 2017. Prior to coming to Carmel, Mr. Thompson served as the dean at Ridge Road Middle and also as a teacher at Westerly Hills Academy. And I am so glad to have Mr. Thompson in his new leadership role, and look forward to hearing and seeing great things from him. Mr. Thompson is also joining us on this call, and I'd like to invite him to share a few brief remarks.
Well, Ms. Marshall, I already owe you one off the bat, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Superintendent Winston and members of the board. Again, I'm ecstatic to have this opportunity to continue to serve the Carmel community, and my wife and I are clearly blessed, certainly blessed to be a part of the Carmel family. So I appreciate the support and guidance from CMS leadership and the leaders that I've had the opportunity to learn from throughout my career in this district. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That concludes my remarks, Madam Chair.
I would just
All
like
right.
to say I am so thrilled to see so many staff people coming back to CMS. We
Mhm.
lost a lot of people and we're getting them back.
From all over the country, from Iowa
That's
to
right.
California, back to Charlotte, North Carolina. All right. So now, colleagues, we have 2 public hearings this evening, and the rules are as follows. Each speaker will be called in to speak 1 at a time. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to address the board. Each speaker may only talk about the topic that is the subject of the public hearing. Individual student matters or specific personnel matters may not be discussed. Personal attacks will not be allowed. Profanity or other inappropriate language will not be allowed. The board reserves the right to cut off and mute any speaker who violates these rules. So our first public hearing is for changes to policy DJ regarding purchasing and contracting. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers for this public hearing?
Madam Chair, there are none.
All right, and did we receive any public hearing statements related to policy DJ?
Madam Chair, there are none.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Well, seeing that there are no speakers or statements relating to changes in policy DJ, I declare this public hearing closed. Next up, we have student assignment considerations for Providence Spring Elementary and McKee Road Elementary. So please allow, we will start with the first 2 speakers, Christy Moore and Virginia Moore. If we could please allow them into the Zoomiverse.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, Christy Moore, you are up.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Christy Moore. I have 2 current children at PSE and 2 future children that will be PSE Rockets. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. First, I'd like to acknowledge that all of the scenarios that are presented only alleviate the overcrowding issues for a short time. I think we all recognize that these are somewhat of a Band-Aid for the longer issues of overcrowding. And I hope that we can continue to work on a longer-term solution. As for the options that are presented, my neighbors and I strongly support the Violet option. I feel that Violet is most equitable as far as balancing utilization between PSE and McKee. It also maintains middle school feeder patterns, which I think is one of the most important things that we can focus on for our students. As we know, middle school is a big transition for all children. And there are several studies that show that having intact friendships as you move from one school to another improves the student's mental, social, and academic health. The Violet option also maintains little or no change to socioeconomic diversity and home to school distance. As a second option, I would support the Blue option because this actually removes a split feeder pattern. Although it does increase home to school distance, it's actually quite minimal when you compare to some other neighborhoods. For example, our neighborhood is 6 or 7 miles from our assigned middle school. But the Blue option does lead to more overcrowding at McKee and overutilization. I would also like to focus on the Gray option, why we have some concerns with that scenario that does affect our neighborhood. First, it disrupts middle school feeder patterns. If that option was chosen, there would be fewer than 10 kids per grade attending Crestdale Middle School, while the remainder of their peers went on to J.M. Robinson together. So that's less than maybe 5% of the class would be assigned to a separate middle school. I worry with such a small cohort of children being sent to a different school for bullying and issues with that. I'd also like to point out for the board that the Gray option is not one coherent neighborhood. The Gray option shows 5 or 6 separate streets, and we all somewhat function as an individual street. We don't have a centralized community clubhouse or playground or central area, and there actually aren't even sidewalks that connect many of our streets. So if those children were moved to middle school together, I want to make it clear that those kids are not a cohesive group being sent together. It's really just children from several different areas. So in summary, I think we all support the Violet option because I think that allows for the best balance between the different options. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Virginia Moore, and following the second Ms. Moore, we'll have Juliana Porter.
Good evening, Superintendent Winston and members of the board. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you regarding the student assignment for Providence Springs and McKee. My name is Virginia Moore. I have a rising second grader who attends PSC and a 4-year-old who will enter kindergarten during the 2021-2022 school year. Let me begin by saying that I recognize the challenges associated with school assignments. And I do want to thank you for taking the time to consider and assess all of viable options to address the overcrowding at PSC. Much like Christy, I'm here to advocate for Violet and ask the board to strongly consider this scenario. While I understand that none of these options ultimately address the overcrowding to the extent that we would like, at the end of the day, I truly believe this is the only scenario that strikes the right balance based on a number of students, maintaining an intact feeder pattern by allowing the South Hall neighborhood to redirect to JM. And there's no negative changes to SES diversity or proximity. My husband and I can't stress the importance of keeping feeders intact. Disrupting the feeder pattern from elementary school to middle school, it's disruptive to students' academic and social stability. And there's research, as you know, that suggests that overall students with stronger peer ties at the beginning of a transition, they manage the process better. And I know that our children adapt, but the transition to middle school is already so difficult that we shouldn't make it worse. And my husband has experienced a broken feeder pattern and can attest to several of the concerns I referenced above. I'll also echo Christy's points related to Gray. That scenario is made up of a bunch of smaller communities. There's no sidewalks, but we operate as one community, and it'll create a disconnect just due to the number of children that would be redirected from McKee to Crestdale. So again, thank you so much for your time. I hope you strongly consider Violet as the best choice for this realignment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Juliana Porter.
Hi, can you see me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you. But
okay. I'm sorry. Let's see. There.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. I'm going to be the third person talking to you about why we don't want the Gray option and why we're trying to advocate for Violet also. I have a rising third grader. I have a kindergartner that's going to start this year. And then I also have a toddler, and we're all in Providence Springs district. We live in Providence Forest, which is the Gray area. The Gray option causes a disrupted feeder pattern, which you've heard a lot about already. Essentially, our kids would have to start this year. My daughter would start in third grade, and then she would have to move in fourth and fifth grade, make all new friends, and then she would not follow those new friends to the middle school because all her friends would be going to McKee and she would be forced to go to Crestdale. So the feeder pattern is really important. It sounds to me like the Gray option does not have the option to absorb into JM Middle. So continuing on with their peers is very important. Again, you're asking 5 separate smaller areas to move. We don't really have a shared sense of community. So it would just be isolating us again. Keeping whole elementary areas intact as part of middle and high school feeder patterns is one of the guiding principles for student assignment per CMS. And then another issue that hasn't really been touched on is traffic and proximity. My neighborhood is considered a cut through to PSE. So we have people from other neighborhoods coming through right on my street to get to PSE. We don't have to leave our neighborhood to get to the school. So having people coming in to go to PSE and then having buses and more traffic leaving to go out to McKee would cause all kinds of traffic issues, confusion, and then again, we don't have sidewalks. So that could be a safety issue for the children involved. And then again, we don't have to leave the neighborhood. Many people can walk. So essentially the violet option would probably be much better because it simplifies the feeder pattern. It keeps all the kids together through middle and high school to get that cementing lasting relationship and continuity. It has the least amount of traffic issues. It doesn't split any neighborhoods. It's consistent with student assignment. And then I know blue also has those same criteria, but it's my understanding that the violet is the only option that would provide the least crowding. So in closing, please don't pick the gray option and consider violet as the best choice. My daughter's decided to come and break up the party, but thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
TV.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, if there are any public hearing statements related to the Providence Spring Elementary and McKee Road Elementary student assignment considerations that were sent via email, would you please read those into the record at this time? And you're muted. 5 cents.
Apologize. Madam Chair, we received one email from Jennifer Eckert Moan, and it reads as follows. Good evening, board members. The board's decision matrix for school boundary decisions lists 4 factors for consideration: home to school distance, intact feeder patterns, socioeconomic diversity, and utilization. Based on the board's own data, none of the options presented have a significant impact on socioeconomic diversity. McKee Road Elementary and Providence Spring Elementary are less than 2 miles apart, making the home to school distance of little utility in reaching a logical resolution. That leaves utilization and feeder patterns. The blue scenario was favored by members of the community who responded to the initial survey. It fixes the feeder pattern issue, but it does so by shifting so many students to McKee Road Elementary that utilization becomes unbalanced. Both the orange and gray scenarios introduce an additional split feed at McKee Road Elementary. As the parent of one of the 32 students who would be transferred to McKee Road under the gray option, and then go on to Crestview Middle School without her peers, I am strongly opposed to any additional split fees. This is an unfair burden to place on young students who are already experiencing the transition to middle school. The balance scenario shifts a smaller number of students to McKee Road, and it allows the 11 students that are currently assigned to Crestview Middle School to continue to J.M. Robinson Middle School with their peers. In doing so, it balances utilization between the 2 elementary schools while maintaining an intact feeder pattern at McKee Road Elementary. The balance scenario is the logical choice to address overcrowding at Providence Spring Elementary School. And it is also the most compassionate choice for the impacted students in our community. Respectfully, Jennifer Eckert Mayon. Madam Chair, that concludes the public hearing statements related to the Providence Spring Elementary and McKee Road Elementary school assignment considerations.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and I declare this public hearing closed. Colleagues, we have 3 action items tonight. The first is to recommend approval of the Title I application. I turn to Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers-Bailey to make this motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to approve the proposed 2020-2021 Title I application as presented, so that our district can move forward with submitting the application and spending plan to the North Carolina Department of Instruction, Public Instruction.
All right, so we have a motion from Ms. Byers Bailey. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, with a second from Ms. De La Hara. Ms. Byers Bailey, would you like to speak to your motion?
I've listened to that Title I proposal closely, and I am really pleased with the fact that the percentage has gone down so that we can include more students into the program, which provides them with additional resources and support to make sure that they get everything that we can, and more of what we can have, what we have to offer with the additional supports that are provided. I especially appreciate the SIP school improvement plan support that they get, because a lot of these schools do have struggle with getting community and parental support to get their plans up and running. Thank you.
All right. Well, we had a good Q&A session earlier, but if there is any more discussion needed or debate right now, now is the time. Does anybody else have anything further to say before we vote? All right. Madam Clerk, would you please call for the vote?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board members, before I begin, please unmute your microphone. Board Member Rhonda Cheek, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Carol Sawyer, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Margaret Marshall, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Sean Strain, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Lenora Shipp, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Jennifer De La Hara, how say you?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers Bailey, how say you?
Yes.
Board Chair Elise Dashew, how say you?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 9-0.
Right, thank you very much. Okie dokie. So next up, the second item is a recommendation for approval of changes to policy DJ. I turn to Dr. Jones of the Policy Committee to introduce this item and to make the motion for its adoption. And as a reminder to the public, this is an item reported out of one of the board's standing committees, and it does not require a second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recommend approval of the proposed changes to policy DJ, purchasing contracting. Madam Chair, this policy was introduced earlier this evening for both a first reading and a public hearing. As I stated then, the changes to the policy before us tonight are designed to create consistency in the contract approval process and link approval authority to a threshold dollar amount, as well as provide additional oversight by the board. These changes were approved by the Policy Committee in a unanimous vote at our most recent committee meeting. Therefore, Madam Chair, I move to approve the changes to policy DJ as recommended.
All right. We don't need a second. So do we have any discussion or debate? All right. Madam Clerk, would you please call for the vote on this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask board members to please unmute your microphones. Board Member Rhonda Cheek, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Carol Sawyer, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Margaret Marshall, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Sean Strain, how say you?
Aye.
Board Member Lenora Shipp, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Jennifer Delahara, how say you?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Bias Bailey, how say you?
Yes.
Board Chair Elise Dashew, how say you?
I say yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 9-0.
All right. Our last action item for this evening is consideration of the minimum hourly rate for all of our full-time non-certified employees. And I turn to Board Member Jennifer De La Hara to make this motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to increase the minimum pay rate for full-time non-certified staff to $15 per hour. This increased pay rate shall be implemented by the superintendent after the release of the $11 million being held in contingency by the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners and will be retroactive to July 1st, 2020.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. De La Hara, a second by Ms. Sawyer. Ms. De La Hara, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I certainly would. I guess I would start by just saying, of course, I'm very pleased that we are offering $15, hopefully, as this passes tonight, an hour to our employees, because we at CMS certainly value our hourly workers. However, you know, the reality with this accelerated version of the original, from the originally endorsed plan is certainly going to cause us to cut back on some things and to redirect some funds. So I'm sure I won't be the only person that may speak to this tonight, but just to highlight a couple things that are going on. You know, our HR department has instituted sort of a soft hiring freeze for our non-essential and central office positions that are frozen. Although we are hiring bus drivers, so we do want to keep that point out there. And I know that principals found out recently that each school now is being run rather than you know, having an employee that you would have to lay off. We do have a pretty big budget gap that we need to close. And we, you know, of course, will be doing the work that we're called to do, which is to minimize the impact on our students. I guess I want to take just a moment also and just sort of address something that I've been seeing and hearing kind of out in the public also, which is sort of this myth that's out there that, you know, CMS must have all of this fat, as it's termed. And I have requested some updated information. I just want to let the public know that to help me understand. And of course, I'll certainly share that with other board members when I get it, and ultimately to the public to understand what our administration costs really are. I didn't get the info, the updated info as of now, which is why I'm mentioning that I'll present it later. But I suspect that it will confirm, like a study that was done in 2014, of which I do have the data for, that CMS's operational costs actually show that we're pretty lean. There was a study done comparing us to Austin and Baltimore and Fulton County, which is of course Atlanta, and other school districts relatively our size, and we were on the lean side. And I just mentioned that because I'm a little uncomfortable with some of the comments that I hear of folks just assuming, be they politicians or even online chatter, that, oh, there must be all of these people making so much money, and therefore insinuating that the district is wasting money. And I just don't know that that's to be the case, and I'm going to continue to research that. But I suspect that we are lean as we have been in the past. And I just want to acknowledge that I personally want a competent legal team. a capable accounting team, great HR practitioners. I mean, let's not forget that, yes, we are, of course, in the business of educating our young scholars. We're also running a $1.6 billion business that needs top talent. And so I'm just offering those comments by way of helping the public understand the importance and in hopes of changing the narrative a bit.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion or debate before we move to the vote? I see Ms. Cheek and then I see Ms. Shipp.
So, Ms. Delhar, you bring up something that I've heard for all the years that I've been an advocate and served on this board, both. And I would point to you something we heard from from Kelly earlier in the Title I. He said that their admin cost for the Title I program were 9.3%. Well under the 12% allotment that the government says that they can use. So that's just another example. But, you know, I point to just a real easy fact. We have 18,900 employees, and of those, 152 make over $100,000. Contrasting with one of our largest funding partners, our county has 5,700 employees, and they have 325 employees making over $100,000. So clearly they have a lot more people on the high end of that that income scale than we, I mean, absolutely an astronomically different amount. So I would love to see the updated numbers as well, but I do know that it's always been very consistently on the lean side. But there is still work to be done. And we are going to have to figure out ways to work more efficiently because of this proposed increase and because on the budget horizon from our funding partners. So that's all I wanted to say.
Ms. Shipp?
I was also kind of in that same tag team and kind of with Rhonda and you also, Jennifer, Ms. Delhar. It has been a time where we felt that it was top heavy. And so over the years, I would say they did work to say, do we need to make changes? Do we really need to look tightly at positions and changing those positions? But was that a good thing? Because I will say the HR department took a hit and it did hurt us not having the kind of red tag service we needed to get the support we needed to quickly hire staff and move into good teachers in our buildings and support staff. So it's kind of a give and take. So when people talk about, do you have a lot of positions, even if it's not so much cost, but is it top heavy as opposed to in the school buildings, in the classroom? And there was that concern. And over years, we saw cuts being made to central office, cuts being made to executive staff positions to try to balance that out, especially when we talk about having to make freezing positions, freezing staff, when we have to make cuts. So it is always that balance of, do we go to central office, executive office, or do we come to the classroom? And we do try to balance that also with what does it cost? But when we look at what's going on, as you mentioned, Ms. Cheek, with the county and other places, we have not been as top heavy, but that has always been, I don't know if that's a myth, it's been some maybe reality actually working in the district. I saw some of that, but I saw CMS working to balance that. And I think it still is, and I'm sure our superintendent can talk about that. It's still a balance between what we do in central office, so to speak, and what we do at the schoolhouse door, where we need to really be able to effectively teach our children. I think that's always going to be kind of a question and an appearance of, is it really true? Have we really balanced it?
Madam Chair, if I could respond for a moment, if that's.
Please do.
Great, thank you. What I would share in terms of providing some context is that, first of all, the information, and thank you for sharing that, Ms. Delhara, that information from 2014 that you referenced was from a study by Education Resource Strategies that had done some work with the district. So that data was from ERS, and they had done a number of comparisons to other districts that you referenced. For further context, one of the things that they indicated was that our central office staffing has really remained consistent since about 2015 at approximately 5.5% of the total district staff. And we are, we'll be glad to update those numbers for the current fiscal year. It'll require that we, pull some detailed data files and do some additional analysis. But I would suspect that our position is one of the lowest spending on central overhead would not have changed significantly. But I just thought it was important to provide that context.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Strain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just been following the discussion here, and from the introduction of the motion through each of the board members speaking to it, it's clear that this is effectively an unfunded mandate. We already had a plan in place in order to raise our minimum pay to $15 an hour. It was a phased implementation over a number of years. And, one of the things is that it's become clear that there is not only a commitment, but an interest to do so and even accelerate that. But that hasn't been recognized, unfortunately, by our funding partners. And I know that we've certainly had some of those conversations with them. And I just want the public to know that commitment is there, has been there. We raised our minimum pay to $13.22 an hour this year. Next year, it was to be $14.11 an hour. And then the following year, in 2021-22, would have been $15 an hour. So the request is really to accelerate that. And as such, I'd like to make a substitute motion, if I may, Madam Chair.
So are we done with the debate and discussion? Is that, Ms. Mays, can I take a substitute motion at this time?
You can.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
All right.
So, Madam Chair, I move that we increase the minimum pay rate for full-time non-certified staff to $15 an hour. 1 year ahead of that which we had planned, briefed to the Board of County Commissioners, and for which we had budgeted. This accelerated increased pay rate shall be implemented by the superintendent once further required funding for the minimum pay raise from $13.22 to $15 an hour is appropriated by the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners and will be retroactive to July 1st, 2020.
I second the motion.
Okay. So would you like to speak further to your substitute motion, Mr. Strain?
Yes, ma'am. So this substitute motion recognizes that we do need additional funding in order to execute this 1 year earlier than we had planned, and effectively says that we will raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour for CMS employees that are referenced in the motion, full-time non-certified staff, once that further funding is appropriated by the Board of County Commissioners, as opposed to what the earlier motion was and what had been requested by the Board of County Commissioners, which was that we would fund that out of cuts and savings that we would find within the organization, which obviously has a negative impact in terms of our students and the services we're able to provide.
All right, thank you. Any discussion or debate of the substitute motion? Ms. Marshall?
I will say I'm caught here because I certainly support getting folks who deserve this $15 an hour as soon as we can. And I think we all agree there. I am very concerned about the issues going forward with the county commission. I've been pretty vocal that we need to ask for what we need, and we need to let those folks know what the costs will be if we don't have those monies. But I am concerned at this late date that we are not going to fulfill this situation with the county commission. And I know that in conversations we've had with our CFO that we're going to be looking at a variety of scenarios and not quickly making some decisions, but being thoughtful as we're going through this pandemic, because frankly, this is about the worst time this could have happened to us because there's so many unknowns. But I am concerned here at the last minute that we can't meet this obligation, which I think we all want to do. And I don't know that I'm going to support this, although it has pained all of us to be walking through this month dealing with the situation that we've got. So I appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness in this, because I think we all want to get there and we don't want to have cuts. I don't know that we have a way out. So I am probably not going to support this substitute motion, but I am going to listen to my colleagues. And if we feel like this is the thing to do, maybe we'll go, but I'm just sort of thinking out loud as we're processing this.
Ms. Sawyer?
Before the county commission passed their budget with the 11 million in a special fund, I'd been in conversations with county commission members to explain what the needs we faced were. And I think while I have always advocated for asking what we need, at this point, the county commission has passed its budget. I don't see them going back and undoing their budget at this point. I think that we are put in a horrible position of having to make funds stretch in ways that they simply won't, and there will be a shortfall, and our students will suffer because of that. But I don't think just telling the county commission we're not going to do it is going to get us $11 million out of their lockbox.
Anybody else? Ms. Sheik?
So I have a real struggle with bully tactics by political organizations. And when an organization passes a budget and tells us you have to do this unfunded mandate, I feel that's bully tactics. I try to step back and look at what to do next. I'm very disappointed at our colleagues that sit in the same, well, now we're not in our big red chairs, but when we're in the big red chairs, they're in the same big red chairs we are. Yet they are asking us to do things and telling us you're not going to get any money for it, just do it. We're needing to restructure our finances at a time where they're giving all their staff raises. And we're faced with the most challenging educational decisions that have ever been faced by a group since in the last 50 years on how to educate kids in a new environment. So I'm struggling with that. I feel like it's bully tactics on their part. And for that reason, the only thing I can do to say back to them is, you can't bully us, is to stand up and say, you can't bully us. So I feel like that supporting this tells the county commission that you can't bully us. It's probably going to pass anyway, and we're going to let them bully us, but I think it just needs to be public. So I hope the media is listening, because I feel like when some organization tells us you have an mandate, we're going to force you to do one thing and then not give you the funds that you need to do it. I can't think of any other way to describe that other than bullying. And we've let ourselves be in this situation far too long from that organization. And that's why I stand up against them tonight. And that is not to say that I'm an ungrateful person for the money that we do get, but I don't think that they are treating us in a manner that they would want to be treated.
Ms. Byers Bailey?
I have a question. Has his motion been seconded?
It has been.
It has been, okay. Thank you.
All right. Ms. De La Hara?
Yeah, and actually Ms. Ship had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Ship.
All right. Sean, I wanted to hear again the very end of that when you were stating, were you stating a time frame on when the money would be released? If this, then this. Could you repeat that part again so I'm clear on?
Yeah, so there's additional money required above and beyond that which we had budgeted for in order to accelerate this pay raise of our minimum wage employees from what we had planned, from what we have today to what we had planned to $15 an hour. And what the motion says is that we will raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour as soon as the county commission gives us the money to do that. As it stands, they have not. And as a result, the only way that we could do this is to make cuts. And that has a negative impact on the services we deliver and directly on our students. And so we're given the option. Do we want to make the cuts and provide $15 an hour, or go back to the county commission and say, we would love to accelerate this, but we need the money to do it. And so we will provide this raise to $15 an hour, provided you provide the funding to do it, and we will make it retroactive to 1 July 2020. That being said, one of our, certainly Ms. Sawyer had raised that the budget has been passed. That is certainly true. And they could meet again and decide that they want to fund this $15 an hour raise for CMS employees, for the non-certified staff. Let me just make sure, full-time non-certified staff, and provide the additional funding to do that. They could do that.
Ms. De La Hara?
I certainly appreciate the spirit of this substitute motion. I'm sure you all recall my comments from my board report just a couple of weeks ago, and I agree with the sentiment of being bullied into this situation. The question was just raised, well, maybe they will go back and change. The issue that I have in envisioning that playing out is that, this came up during the straw vote process. And many of us had conversations with county commissioners in hopes that before the final budget vote was taken, that they would change their mind. And they didn't. And so those conversations did take place. So I just, for the public record, want that to be out there too. It's not that we're all just sitting back going, well, we're just going to let this happen. Many of us fought really hard to say, don't let this happen. So they've really, of course, put us in between a rock and a hard place. And this is an unfortunate situation. It is an unfunded mandate. There's no other way to say it. I am not feeling comfortable, though, with risking $11 million that they have proven to us already that they're completely willing to withhold. So it's unfortunate that we can't raise our own, have our own taxing authority and raise our own money, but it's not that we want to be treated this way, but in a way they kind of can treat us this way. And they've shown us that they're willing to do it. So I just don't have faith that enough convincing and talking is going to keep them from withholding that $11 million. That's the way I'm leaning right now.
Ms. Marshall?
I want to add one more thing to that, to sort of piggyback a little bit on what Ms. De La Hara has said in terms of the advocacy we did between the time it came up in the straw vote and when we voted. We also have done advocacy on the state level. Just today, we had an Intergovernmental Relations Committee meeting where we're drafting a letter of a variety of things we need the legislature to act on, and some very quickly. But this, getting our employees to a $15 minimum, where all other state employees, with the exception of public school employees, were included. So the state has shown a willingness to do this for just about every other subgroup except public school. There may be a few other small subgroups there. So I think that there's a recognition that the state is not holding up their end. The county feels put upon to have to do everything, but then all of a sudden have come back and said, no, we want you to do this, and we're telling you to do this. So again, we're caught between a rock and a hard place. We have advocated with our county partners. We are advocating, have been, and will continue to do so on the state level. So I don't know that I have a lot of confidence that that's going to happen in the state this year, but we're not going to let up. So I just want to again say to our employees on this end of the pay scale, we see you and we value you, and you are important to us, and we will fight, and we are going to continue to fight. But we just do not have an infinite supply of money, and here we are. So I just want to make everyone aware of that. Thank you.
So I'll weigh in on this before we call the vote on the substitute motion. Well, I want to bring the focus back to our hourly workers, our full-time hourly workers, our custodians whose jobs are so important, our food service workers, our every one of our hourly workers. They need to know that that we greatly value them and that this is important to us. So I want to bring it back to that, because I really hate that this got so ugly and it turned into such a battle. It shouldn't have to be that way, but it is, and we will work our way through it. I am troubled about how we're going to close the funding gap that we're looking at, as we all are here, especially with all the uncertainties of the pandemic that we're dealing with. At the same time, I don't think it is really feasible to go back to our county funding partners right now and to ask for them to reopen the budget. We have been very respectful and fact-based in all of our communications about the impact of this, but it is very important to them that this happens this year with this amount of money. And I just, reality check, I just don't see us changing that right now. And so for that reason, reluctantly, I don't support this substitute motion. But I think this is a healthy conversation to be having. And I certainly support the spirit behind the substitute motion. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you please call for the vote on the substitute motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board members, before I begin, please unmute your microphones. Board Member Rhonda Cheek, how say you?
I vote yes.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones, how say you?
Unmute. You're muted, Ruby.
And just a reminder, this is not a vote on whether we do $15 an hour or not. The substitute motion is a vote on whether we go back to the county, ask them to reopen their budget process and allocate additional dollars so that we don't have a funding gap to do $15 an hour this year.
Madam Chair, that's not the substitute motion. The substitute motion is that we commit to going to $15 an hour as soon as the county commission releases the funds to do so. So
that's the motion.
That's
the original
substitute motion. That's not the original motion. The substitute motion, shall I reread it?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
Mr.
let-
Strain.
Yeah,
Madam Chair, I move that we increase the minimum pay rate for full-time non-certified staff to $15 per hour, 1 year ahead of that which we had planned, briefed to the Board of County Commissioners, and for which we had budgeted. This accelerated increased pay rate shall be implemented by the superintendent once further required funding for the minimum pay raise from $13.22 to $15 an hour is appropriated by the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners and will be retroactive to July 1st, 2020.
how is that different from the original motion?
The original motion says that we release it, we pay it as soon as they release the $11 million they had encumbered in some special way, which may or may not be appropriate anyway. But this is contingent on their release of the additional funding required in order to accelerate our plan.
Exactly. So the difference is they have completed their budget process. They have voted on their budget. That's all done. They have allocated and encumbered $11 million to cover us getting all of our hourly employees up to full-time hourly employees up to $15 an hour. We have a gap to close. The original motion does not ask them to allocate additional funding. Your motion has us going back to the county to require additional funding.
My motion requires them to pay for the acceleration of this by 1 year, correct?
Above and beyond the encumbered 11 million.
Yes.
So that's the difference between the two motions. Okay, just wanted to be clear, and I'm sorry. Do we need to, Ms. Mays, with that clarification, do we need to start the vote again?
The only person who's voted was Ms. Cheek, and I believe she understood the motion,
Okay.
the
all right,
substituted motion.
Okay, all right.
That is correct. I vote yes.
Okay,
Voting yes for the
I vote yes for the
motion,
substitute.
right? And I voted no for the substituted motion, but you didn't get, I was on.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So which are you doing now?
no, we're voting on the substitute motion now. And Madam Clerk is calling for the vote for the substitute motion. If it passes, then
That will be the.
on. If it fails, then we go back to the original motion.
And if I may, Madam Chair, so for clarification, I have Board Member Cheek, a yes, Dr. Ruby Jones, no,
Okay,
and I'll continue from there.
okay, thank you.
Board Member Carol Sawyer, how say you?
No.
Board Member Margaret Marshall, how say you?
No.
Board Member Sean Strain, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Lenora Shipp, how say you?
No.
Board Member Jennifer Delahara, how say you?
No.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers Bailey, how say you?
Yes.
Board Chair Elise Dashew, how say you?
No.
Madam Chair, the motion fails by a vote of 3-6. I'm sorry, 6-3.
Okay,
6 members to vote no, 3 members to vote yes.
all right. Okay, thank you. So we're back to the original motion. Are there any board members who still wish to speak to the original motion?
Repeat the original motion,
Yeah.
please.
Give me just one moment to pull it back up. The motion is to increase the minimum pay rate for full-time, non-certified staff to $15 per hour. This increased pay rate shall be implemented by the superintendent after the release of the $11 million being held in contingency by the Mecklenburg Board of County Commissioners, and retroactive to July 1st, 2020.
All right, any further discussion? Mr. Schul, do you have anything to add? Nope. Fine if you don't. Okay. Okay, I will just, reiterate what I said before, which is that I want this to be a celebration. I know we've got a number of custodial staff watching tonight, and I want this to be a celebration. It's just a tough spot that we're in, and this happens a lot with public schools. So we will do all that we can to minimize the impact on the necessary cuts to our students. We will be back. I know superintendent has directed his staff to, look deeply at where we can tighten the belt. And we're also awaiting more news on state funding, what may be coming with the state budget. But we will be back to have more conversations on how we need to revisit our budget, what we need to cut to close this gap. But meanwhile, it is good that our hourly workers are going to $15 an hour this year. Those are my 2 cents. So Madam Clerk, would you please call for the vote of the original motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Board Member Rhonda Cheek, how say you?
Abstain. I can't vote on this because of bullying.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Carol Sawyer, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Margaret Marshall, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Sean Strain, how say you?
Abstain.
Board Member Lenora Shipp, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Jennifer Delahara, how say you?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Bias Bailey, how say you?
Yes.
Board Chair Elise Dashew, how say you?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 7 and 2 abstains.
All right, thank you.
Abstentions.
So we're now going to move on to the reports section of the night. First, we have a report on budget amendments for May of 2020. I turn to the superintendent for this report.
As presented, Madam Chair.
All right, next, budget amendments for June 2020. I turn to the superintendent for this report.
Also as presented.
All right, and then a report on capital project ordinances for June 2020. I turn to the superintendent.
Also as presented.
Fourth, we have a facilities and operations report on environmental stewardship and sustainability. I turn to the superintendent for this report.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is also as presented. This report was given by staff at the Facilities and Operations Committee last month, shared some great information, and we wanted to make it available to members of our public, and would like to submit this as reported as well, as
Great.
presented.
Thank you. And that's on our Board Docs website for anybody who wants to look that up. It's worth your review. Okay, and then we have the Accountability Management Oversight Report, and I turn to the superintendent for this report.
Thank you again, Madam Chair and board members. This is the third in a series of 3 consecutive management oversight presentations from our academics team. You'll recall that you initially heard from our learning and teaching team, followed by the Office of School Performance. And now you will hear from Dr. Frank Barnes, our Chief Equity Officer, who will deliver our management oversight report on accountability. Before Dr. Barnes begins, I would like to recognize Dr. Matt Hayes, our Deputy Superintendent in charge of academics, who will be with us to help answer any follow-up questions. And with that, I would turn to Dr. Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, and thank you, members of the board, Chair Dashu. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I'm going to share my screen with you. And can you all hear me and see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come before you. I want to also echo Mr. Winston's acknowledgement of Dr. Matt Hayes, who is the leader of the academic services team. The Office of Equity and Accountability is one of 4 parts of the larger academic services unit. Within the Office of Equity and Accountability, we are 3 parts: the Office of Equity, the Office of Accountability, and the Office of Student Assignment and School Choice. You've already heard from my colleague, Ms. Akeisha Craven Howell. And tonight I'll be talking to you about accountability, and I look forward to coming back to you in the near future to talk about our equity work as well. I speak to you not just on behalf of myself, but on behalf of a team of individuals who are diverse, talented, and committed that make up the accountability team. I think it is not bragging to say that districts would love to have this assembly of talent and commitment. And I know that many members of our team could work in another district if they so chose. They could work in another industry if they so chose, but they choose to work for public schools, and they choose to work for the families and students of Mecklenburg County. So I want to acknowledge their efforts, acknowledge their tireless commitment, and all of the work that they've done, which I'll be presenting for your oversight, review, and discussion. Many people view our work as data work, kind of a series of numbers that have very little meaning, that can go down a black hole with seemingly no end in sight. But we really view our work differently. When we look at the mission and vision of our department, we see ourselves trying to leverage and support data-informed decisions to catalyze actions that result in continuous improvement, increased achievement, and gap elimination. That's why we've assembled, and that's why we serve the way we do. Our aim is similar to what you've heard us present as the Equity Office. It's to interrupt practices that create, sustain, or reproduce disparities in order to cultivate the uniqueness and talents of every student and eliminate the predictability of who succeeds academically, which is what was the language that was stated so well and so poignantly in the last version of Policy 88 before your timely revisions. There are 5 areas for oversight that I would like to present for your review and discussion. One is data collection. Second is data processing. A third is information creation. A fourth, information sharing. And the last, action. These are the areas I'd like to present for your review. Data collection. We as a team, we oversee and manage the federal and state testing within our district, overseeing security policies and procedures. We ensure the integrity, quality and security of those data. We collect and investigate and submit all testing irregularities, and I often tell them and the people they support in our schools that they protect the integrity of our district in managing those state and federal assessments that we have to be able to administer. Not this school year, but in 18-19. In the 18-19 school year, that team supported schools with the administration of nearly 250,000 state and federally required assessments. They also, in this school year, in fall and winter, provided in-school year data using our measure of academic progress, MAP assessments, which are universal screeners in grades K-8 in reading and mathematics, supporting the administration and use of data of over 306,000 administrations. We also collected data on the perceptions of our experience of our school district from our teachers and our students and our parents and our employees, other employees, I should say. And with our Insight survey, we had an 83% response rate amongst our students. We had a 57% response rate. And I also wanted to say that as of this June, when we wanted to get feedback on the remote learning experience that our parents and students had, over nearly 14,000 of our parents responded and nearly 13,000 of our students responded. And just recently, as of this weekend, we closed a CMS employee pulse survey of our staff, and we had over 10,000 responses to that from our employees. Once we collect data, we also process it. We organize and classify that data. We manage processes to clean it. We manage processes to make sure it's updated often nightly when data is available, and maintain and provide secure process to make sure that that data is rendered accurately, appropriately, the reports, dashboard, and other related tools. One of the premier tools that we have, which is an inward-facing Navigator portal, our employees. This past school year, the Navigator portal, which is available internally to CMS employees, was accessed nearly 1.4 million times by 9,000 distinct users with over 4,000 hits per day. We have 558 reports which are actively used, and although 50% of those reports and rosters are disaggregated by race and gender, and we created 43 new reports this past year. To complement that inward-facing dashboard, we also have an outward-facing dashboard, an interactive dashboard that has what's really we call a data zone. And this data zone was created in alignment with your own policy for a data dashboard. Within it, we have 45 interactive dashboards that have over 40 different measures that look at race, subgroup, gender, and school poverty level. This is available right on our district website. And for our watching and listening public, I'd like to show you right where it is now if I can. And I'm just going to shift here. And what you should see, hopefully you can see, is our CMS website. On any given day, it can be, the dashboard can be found right here on the spotlight. Someone could scroll right down the spotlight, and here it is on the performance dashboard. They'd click on that link right there, and it would take them to our data zone. And there's 4 areas of our data zone at this point, and it continues to evolve. You have our district performance dashboard, our school performance dashboard, our breaking the link reports, and a survey administration area, which I'll talk to momentarily. If someone wanted to look up their school or a school in their community, they would just click on the school dashboard. They could pick on any school, and I'm going to pick on Philip O'Berry Academy. And right there, what would come up is information on the school. Its enrollment and demographics, its school performance grade, its end of course performance, and it would be both for college and career ready rates and grade level proficiency, chronic absenteeism, in school and out of school suspensions. All of those things would be there. If someone were to just hover over one area, we're going to say graduation endorsements. Someone could click right there, and they'd be able to see that measure is aggregated by race. If someone said, hey, I think I want to see what that might look like for another school, they could compare another school if they so chose. And so say they wanted to compare East Mecklenburg High School. They would be able to compare by gender, by overall student body, by subgroup, right there to see what that would look like. If they wanted to look at another area, say time in school, they could click overall and look at the district dashboard and look at that. And that would appear by race and by subgroup. And they can certainly drill in on any of these other elements. These are all available to the public, available to other members of our community, and it's actively updated annually. With that, I'm going to return back to the presentation and sharing my screen. And hopefully you can see my screen as I'm sharing it.
See it.
Perfect. I'm having a little trouble with my own cursor, so I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and I'm going to reshare it just to help the technology a little bit. Perfect. Thank you for your patience. So this is exactly what it looks like, and someone could see those different elements for their own use. Since we've put out the performance dashboard, we've seen our requests for data from the public go down, which is good, meaning we're spending less time answering data requests and more time trying to make information out of the data and get into the hands of our school community and partners to be able to inform continuous improvement. But still, as our data requests have declined, we still this past year had over 100 formal requests for data that we responded to, which we completed in an average of 6 business days. We fulfilled 31 requests for data from internal stakeholders and over 100 other requests from external stakeholders. We approved 20 requests for research and provided 49 community partners who we have formal MOUs with to provide them data on the specific students they serve on a quarterly basis to inform their continuous improvement. These sets of requests do not reflect informal requests from both this body, our executive staff, as well as other friends of the district who we try to serve as prudently and as quickly as we possibly can. But as we take data, we also want to take this data and create information. And in doing so, we want to provide insight, context, and clarity and transparency, make it accessible and relevant in how we display it, and be able to leverage the work of external researchers to increase our knowing about what works and what doesn't work to continue to help us continuously improve and do better. One tool that we've produced, which is a complement to our internal facing dashboard, is this dashboard on several measures which we update quarterly as data becomes available. Looking at a variety of measures, which you see here before you on the slide, accompanied by executive summaries to help once again provide that context and the visualization so people can clearly see where we are to help us inform decisions at the district level. These data can be disaggregated by race, by gender, by subgroup, and by learner community as well, be looked at across the district. Within our Navigator portal, we're able to get down to what students know and can do during the school year. Reports that contain information about student level mastery so that we can talk about how do we modify instruction during the school year to support their continued growth and development. Amongst our evaluations, there's some things that we do with our current body of analysts and researchers. We also partner with other organizations and other companies to help deepen our knowing. Currently, we have 7 program evaluations that are in progress. Many of them are multiple year or multi-year studies, looking at everything from cultural proficiency and restorative practices to the effectiveness of our large curriculum implementation efforts in English language arts and mathematics, as well as additional efforts. We've also done a set of research analytic briefs, and we're releasing Breaking the Link Volume 3 as we sunset the former Policy ADA and transition to the new Policy ADA, which this body approved. Just recently, in the last 30 to 35 days, we also partnered with our IT partners led by Derek Root and the Equity Office and our Equity Superintendents to be able to capture data for teachers for their students, giving them feedback on how they did in grades K through 8. Those data which were collected by, actually provided by teachers, over 105,000 students receiving direct feedback across the grade spans K through 8. Was collected from IT as it was put in our data warehouse, and user-friendly reports being made, as well as reports for teachers in lieu of EOG and EOC data to be able to have information on their incoming students to inform their planning next year. And those reports are going home to parents this month if they're not already there. But as we collect data, we found over the years that it's not sufficient just to produce data or to produce information, but we need to get it in the hands of practitioners to push out things to them to inform their work. So we have one of the most talented teams a district could ask for to be able to provide training on multiple measures to help with goal setting, to help with continuous improvement, and to help even make meaning of our educator value added assessment system, or EVAS, growth data as part of their work. This team of 4 specialists led by a director, these 5 individuals facilitated over 500 PD sessions on data form instruction, serving over 6,000 attendees. They supported multiple district departments. They provided ongoing support to 30 schools supporting their school improvement teams. I want to boast on this particular team as they were invited to the International ASCD Conference, the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, for the 2nd year in a row. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, they had to turn down the invitation, but we're looking forward to getting them to whatever venue will allow them to, given public health and financial. But I wanted to say that this team is remarkable. They're former teachers and administrators in the district, and they're a great complement to some of the great minds that we have of analysts, researchers, programmers, and strategists. And we've put all this data together so we can form action by our central office and our school leaders. One example of what that looks like is from Breaking the Link 1. We the achievement gaps that have been persistent, and what we came into our strategic plan that now Mr. Winston oversees is that we needed to make a guarantee of a standards aligned viable curriculum that can be ready for every student in every class every day, and we're working on that currently. We also identified inequitable access to advanced courses, and from that we set an AP course offering baseline, saying in each of our high schools there would be a minimum of 10 AP classes in all of our schools. And through our initiative Access 2024, which started with an outside partner, which are now transitioning to be part of our systemic work, is to then, once we provide that access to courses, to push students into those courses and prepare them and support them to be successful. We're into our fourth cohort of that work, and we're looking forward to taking that across all of our comprehensive high schools by the conclusion of the year. But as much as we've done well, there's opportunities for continuous improvement that we need to bring to your attention that are on our radar screen that we're working to focus on. There are 3 areas in particular I want to speak to this evening to bring to your attention and to the attention of our community. One is increasing transparency, which is always a priority for us. This last spring, we administered a survey to our students that had some questions that were problematic for some of our parents, which we understand. And although we have processes and procedures in place and we need to make sure we adhere to them, fundamentally what our community said to us is that we need to know about what you're asking our students before you ask them. We want you to be more transparent. In response to their feedback, before we administered the student or parent questionnaire this past June, we created this other part of our data zone, a survey administration area that provides both the purpose of surveys and the questions, and a guarantee that we'll provide a preview window for any district-wide survey that's administered to students or parents. We did that, and this last June, during that preview window, over 16,000 people visited and reviewed those surveys. So certainly it was something that we heard, and we're going to continue to work on and embrace increasing the transparency, not just from our office, but for our district overall. A second thing we've embraced is fostering focus. The quote before you here is from Herbert Simon, who was the Nobel Prize winner in economics in 1978. I've tried not to read the slides to you verbatim, but I'd like to read this quote if I may. And he said this: "In an information-rich world, the wealth of information means a dearth of something else, a scarcity of whatever it is that information consumes. What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention." What we realize is oftentimes what people expect us is to be in the data business, and we have been one of the best in the country at doing that. But in maintaining what we said, 558 actively used reports, it consumes small, limited, very precious time, energy, and know-how to maintain those reports. And by serving our collection of internal and external customers, we could be providing more data that's actually stealing attention as opposed to creating a laser-like focus on a set of key priorities. So to foster focus, we're going to be consolidating and eliminating reports, setting a target for the number of reports we're going to eliminate for this next school year. We're going to do that in concert with our strategic plan, with our academic services team, and under the leadership of our team here, led by Daniel Miller in the Office of Accountability, to identify what we need to be able to reduce, to be able to give back people attention, and to reduce the abundance of data so that we have an abundance of knowing. Also, the third area that we want to improve on is adapting to remote professional learning and school support. I've already taken a moment to brag on the great team that we have, but at the time of the pandemic, when we had to close our facilities, 100% of our trainings were all requiring face-to-face delivery. We had to quickly flip to say, how do we get training to people when we've been built on a face-to-face model? Quickly, the team began to leverage the Canvas platform, the same that our teachers use for their students, and begin to load up trainings for people to access. They also took the initiative to get software to be able to record trainings so you could have anytime, anywhere access to the types of trainings we've been able to offer to make it more user-friendly in anticipation of continued need to not be able to be face-to-face with the number of people that we have been, given many things that are going on in our state, in our nation, and around the world. But as much as we're doing well, and as much as we're going to continue to do better, there's some things we just need to stop doing or start doing. So we are shifting gears to help our district go farther, faster. And there's two things in particular that are examples of the type of work we want to do, One is to integrate data and performance management to improve our outcomes. As I mentioned earlier, people see our work as the data people, and we've been asked and we will answer the call to measure and monitor, but we also want to catalyze and create solutions and strategies to systemic problems. Once again, as our vision says, producing the highest quality solutions that can catalyze actions resulting in continuous improvement, increased achievement, and gap elimination. That's something we want to continue to be able to do. What we've started this school year, which we're going to expand on, is a process to be able to take the data we have and to quickly go from the data to those strategic solutions. We started with an area that Mr. Winston has said is a priority for our community and is a priority for him personally as a leader. And that's to look at the disproportionality we have in out-of-school suspensions. Under the co-leadership of Ms. Kathy Elling, who is our Chief of School Performance, to be able to look at this so we can talk about how will we reduce disproportionality. We're excited that we're going to be able to bring you some information about this before the summer concludes, to talk about how the targets we want to reduce and how we want to do that, both in the 2020-21 school year, as well as in the 2021-22 school year. That work is beginning, and as we use this as a prototype focusing on a key priority, we'll expand this to 4 to 5 to 6 other areas to accelerate our continuous improvement, and we're excited our team is part of that leadership in partnership with our strategy management office. We also want to impact the student experience, and I'm almost through, so thank you for your patience. But what we've been doing for approximately a decade or more is working with other departments, particularly our Office of School Performance and our principals, to collect data to make sure that our graduation rate data is both credible, safe, and accurate. And what we've seen in those data is that there's a number of students who are dropping out before they even reach senior year. There's a percentage of students who are being retained at least once during their high school career, and they're getting off track for graduation. And as we look at graduation endorsement earnings across the racial subgroups, our Asian and white students are outperforming their African American and Hispanic students in predictable ways. We want to interrupt that predictability. And we want to develop solutions that can minimize the compliance-based manual process that we have and support our counselors' efforts to spend their time to do exactly what they're required to do, but also give them time and tools back to do what they love to do, to support students. What we're producing, and this is in beta form now, will be rolled out next year, is a high school student experience tool. What you see here is a screenshot of the kind of landing screen. And what you see is counselors' names, and what someone could do, a principal, a teacher, a counselor, could look across the student body or just their particular set of students and look and see how they're doing. Look and see, are they failing courses? Have they been retained? Do they have AP potential and are they in AP courses? Are they on track for a graduation endorsement? Are they taking college level courses, those advanced placement, international baccalaureate, Cambridge or dual enrollment courses, and be able to look and see where we have challenges, opportunities, and successes. Those will all be rendered right there and will be updated nightly. But if someone wanted to look at one of these particular areas or even multiple ones at the same time, they would just through a click of a button, be able to push, and they'd go down to a roster. Every roster will come up on 6 to 8 pages a piece. And what a person will see who's using this tool, they'll see the actual faces of the students who have dreams and aspirations. And what they'll see is where students appear to be on track, but they'll be color coded. And what you see here on your screen is there would be a student who would be needing of our attention, would have that red insignia here. And what this indicates is that student is chronically absent. They've been absent more than 10% of their days in membership. We would know that this is a student who we need to push in, intervene, and see what's going on in that particular situation and how we can support him or her. With a click of a button, you'd click on that student and that student's profile would come up. You'd be able to look and see how is that student doing to get right to action soon to help that student meet her potential or avoid a pitfall. These are things that we're producing. These are 2 examples of the types of things to create solutions and strategies to systemic problems that we want to do. Because although many people see us as the data business, we see our work like this. Students succeeding, students working, collaborating, thinking deeply and analytically to solve 21st century problems. And I want to say on behalf of one of the best accountability teams in the country, bar none, thank you for allowing us to serve you, this community, and its families. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I welcome your questions, suggestions, and otherwise.
All right. I see Dr. Jones ready to jump in there. And you're muted though, got to unmute yourself.
Unmute. I don't know how that keeps happening. So before I make some comments, Gabe, I'd like to hear some response from what you just heard as a student. But I do want to compliment your department, Dr. Barnes. What I think I heard in this, and it's a lot to absorb, tremendous amount. But what I heard mostly was that we need to do something with the data, integrate the data into focused strategies and active work to get more students achieving, more students reading, more students in higher level classes, in accelerated work. That by definition is, I lost my friend, Mr. Kingsley, high expectations. And so I'd like, because I'm a plain person, to see how that does translate that high expectations. For instance, how are we strategically going about getting more of our Black and brown children in the higher level classes? Are we actually having students reading novels and books rather than snippets of information? Are we going deep in the learning process? And I think this is what I'm hearing. I hope it is, because year after year that I've been on the board, I sort of don't get a feeling of that, and I don't see it. So not enough to be such that I'm disappointed every year when our scores are put out there. We're working hard, but are we going deep, and do we really have that high expectation? And then that's something we really need to just put out there and say to teachers, what does this mean and how are you going about it? That's more of a statement and not a question. But I want to ask Gabe, a student, his observations.
Madam Chair, can I? So I thought quite a few things. Thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Jones. First, we'll start with the positive things. That I really think that's a fantastic initiative from a high school perspective. The data, really the precision in which we're able to get to students and see rates of absenteeism, whether they're on track for graduation, things like that. My comment there is that, are we putting a burden on our counselors to be able to dismantle systemic racism just by looking at the data? So I think that for that to be able to be realized, we have to be able to start creating a culture at our schools which is specifically empowering and encouraging minority students to reach their full potential, which is why I think the imperative needs to be that not only we have this kind of precision in data at a high school level, but we have it before a third grade level at elementary schools as well. Because if they're not meeting that third grade reading level, then that's really what's setting them off track.
Can I pause you right there, Mr. Schul, only because you've made a couple of really great points, and I'd love to hear Dr. Barnes respond to that. And then I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, sure.
Sure. Mr. Schultz, thank you very much for your questions, and Dr. Jones for your comments as well. I think what you've said is, no, I do not think, will I assert or make a case that data can dismantle institutional racism. But certainly data should be part of the equation and should be part of the solution. And I think your indirect comment, Mr. Schul, is astute and pointed and timely. So what we need to do is to be able to quote one of our board members who concluded her tenure, she needed to inspect what we expect. And as we're going on and doing multiple types of efforts, whether it be culture change, resources, general practice, we need to be monitoring in regular intervals to see if those efforts are actually having an impact. But certainly the types of things, when you talk about institutional racism, we need to, from the governance of this body to the practitioner, need to look at how do we do things differently, and are there practices that have seeped into our organization that we need to interrupt, that often go forward quietly, unconfronted, that are producing disparities. I agree with you wholeheartedly in what I feel that you were suggesting. So I'm glad you said it. I appreciate your leadership in that way. Similarly, we wanted to start in grade 9, but we want to move forward through the middle grades and on through the elementary grades. Our team is lean but talented, so this is where we could begin. As we learn, we'll continue to go farther, so I appreciate your encouragement, and hopefully before you graduate and go on to bigger and better things, we can get closer to what you've just charged to do.
And of course, I acknowledge completely that you guys are doing amazing work, and that the work that needs to be done is by no means an easy challenge. So then I had some more specific questions as well. We were talking about on action about AP course offering baselines. First of all, I think it's a fantastic initiative that we have 10 AP courses as a mandate for schools now. I think one of the problems that's still there is that increasing AP courses is still based off of demand, which is problematic when schools have historically been unempowered to ask for AP courses in the first place. So I'm wondering, what kind of information are we giving schools about AP and IB course offerings so that students are more aware and are more encouraged to demand those courses, seeing as that's the context in which they can get more APs?
I'm glad you asked. Part of Dr. Condra Ratley in the Equity Office co-leads an initiative which we've dubbed Access 2024. And what we did in a partnership with another organization is begin a cohort by cohort of schools to be able to broaden our definition of AP potential. Advanced placement, potential, and broaden that definition more than just performance on test scores, but also interest and exhibitions of grit and persistence. We begin to do that analysis, not just for 10th graders and 11th graders, but as early as 9th grade. Then what we recognize is part of what we ask those individuals is also who is a trusted adult in their school. And we'll repeat this in greater depth when we come back to you around with the Equity Office. And asking them, a trusted adult, who is that person who, when they're having an academic struggle, they can lean to? Who is that person who could be encouraged to be able to do more, to push more, and to take that class and to take a risk? That's something we're already seeing tremendous gains, Dr. Jones, for percent of Black and Brown students in the schools that we've worked with. So part of our way is to both do outreach, broaden the definition of readiness, do outreach to those students to encourage them to take the courses, remove obstacles for them getting in the courses. And we're working with our colleagues in advanced studies, led by Kate Sinceri, to make sure that we're preparing the teachers to support those students when they're there. I think the last leg of that is to provide other supplementary supports to students. So when they have academic struggle, they not just have moral support, they have academic support. That's an area where we're growing as a district. We're not there yet, but I think I agree with you, Mr. Schewel, that just providing the courses and hoping people come is not going to itself eliminate the disparities. It's just a portion of a larger strategy.
And what I would encourage there is to have information on school websites in both English and Spanish, talking about APN course offerings that students can readily access and can have access to those same trusted adults that they can easily email and such. I think I'm done for now, but if I have anything else, I'll let you know.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to note that we've been joined by Dr. Hayes, who was listening actively in the wings. So certainly he can answer some of these questions as well.
Thank you.
I see Ms. Shipp and then I see Ms. De La Hara. I hope I haven't skipped anybody. And you're muted, Ms. Shipp.
Yes, I think that this is great work. Dr. Barnes, I have been and seen data. We've had data-wise training, data-driven, deep data dives. We can talk a lot about data. One of the things I want to say about data, and you kind of alluded to that, data must make sense. And then where to from here? We had a superintendent would say all the time, and so what now? And I think Superintendent Winston, you probably know that too. We can have a lot of data, but where to from here? How do we use the data in each of our schools? And I'm going to go down to the elementary, which has been mentioned a lot. We really needed to look at data to drive instruction. When we look at advanced courses, TD Catalyst program, we start there. And we constantly had to work, especially in our schools with the greatest need, to look at getting kids tested for TD, getting them into that track, or providing catalyst training. We did not always have the support of a TD teacher, part-time TD teacher coming to support that advanced work that we're talking about that starts at the elementary level. So we really want to look at how does that data serve us? We know we have kids that need to be accelerated. How do we push them as young as second grade when they get certified as gifted? Or also catalyst, because a lot of kids did not get in that model, but we know they were high achievers and we needed to constantly push those students as well. So we have good data. I used the Navigator tool, which was awesome to use. We had lots of data. I think one of the things that schools need to do is talk about what does that data tell us about attendance, tests, curriculum and instruction, programs, by race, by subgroups. We used to do a really good job with that and taking all of that data, disaggregating that data, and then using that data to drive instruction. So that's, to me, the biggest thing that we can do is using data effectively to drive instruction. You have given us so many great tools over the years to do it. Now, the question is, and I think that's what Dr. Jones was alluding to, how do we use this data to ensure our students are reading at third grade? That's so important, because if they are not reading by third grade, we're already seeing that pipeline. So we really have to say what's happening pre-K to second grade to accelerate our kids, to make sure that we're doing all we can do based on the utilization of data, since we're talking about data.
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask, have y'all looked at specifically the TD and Catalyst programs as well, and the kind of data we get from that and how we're going to utilize supporting high flyers? And it's especially, I had second language children that were also actually gifted in high flyers that we pushed. So we do have those programs I think we need to look at.
Yes, ma'am. I think there's two sets of data. Certainly, Katie Sinceri, who's presented to this body, is leading that work. But through our specialists, we use two different types of data to kind of look at our students who are either at standard or beyond the standard. And I'm going to say this looking at Mr. Strain, we do use our EVOS data to be able to look at students who are both in our 5th quintile and those of students who are projected to be 4th. Level 4, level 5 scoring to see how are they doing. That's at the conclusion of the school year. But we also have a measure of academic progress that we administer in the fall, winter, and spring, K through 8 in English language arts and mathematics, that allows us to look at our students making progress in the school year, both by skill area and as well as to be able to look at them across a national norm. So those are data that we use. Do we have more work to do? But I think we have a team that's trying to figure out both to widen the door to get into TD and then to say, how do we support students who are in those advanced programs?
All right, Ms. De La Hara.
Thank you. Just a quick question. As a mom who will have a future high schooler next year and another one coming up 2 years after that, I'm very excited about this new dashboard that you guys are rolling out. My question is just in relation to, will it be able also to send alerts or notify if a student falls into potential ineligibility to play sports or any other kind of extracurricular? Like, is that built in also to make sure that those things aren't missed?
Right now it's being beta tested. That is not a current feature. We can look at seeing if we can add that kind of feature. I think you brought up two different aspects. One is push notification, not waiting for someone to review the dashboard, but push notifications. What we haven't added is push notifications for a parent or a student to let him or her know how they're doing. But we want to have push notifications as part of those aspects. Around athletic eligibility, we haven't put that in. That perhaps is something we can add as the tool evolves.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I know sometimes those type of things come our way, and I don't know if that's the best way to go about it, but it could be added as a way to simplify it for the counselor or whoever is in charge of having to look for that information if it's some way pushed out. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else? Ms. Marshall. Unmute.
Thank you. Dr. Barnes, you know, it's always incredible to hear you speak because it is definitely a marriage of heart and head, because I know your personal commitment and your team's commitment to advancing the progress of our students in every way. And it takes a lot of brain power to figure out how to drill down and how to do this. So just a couple points, but first I always want to say that to you and your team, because I know that it's one thing to have data, but when you have, again, heart behind that data, that's when we can get some things done. So I am very pleased that you've mentioned that we had 558 reports, that you are eliminating some of those possibilities and targeting those down. And again, getting our team of folks on school sites to really be concentrated on what they're looking for and to utilize those reports and to be, I think that's just the right goalpost to set. And I appreciate that. You mentioned that I think we inspect, I can't remember what Miss Ellis Stewart used to say.
Inspect what you expect.
There you go. And then also sort of the, you know, if you only measure what you value what you measure, that sort of thing. So I think that while but just measuring everything may not be the correct way to go. So I really appreciate the fact that you're narrowing things down. Just in terms of earlier you talked about survey of COVID and of our response to COVID in terms of parent, student, and teacher. And I think I may have even asked this with our academic reports last time, will that be centralized on one of the portals somewhere? We'll be able to access that in terms of public, or is that just more of an after action report? I'd like to be able to talk about that, access that, and let folks look at that, particularly as we continue to sort of deal with the situation that we're in.
Yes, ma'am. We're in the process of analyzing those data now. And so I think part of our transparency is when we have findings, just like we would do our EOG or EOC scores, and say, here's what you said. We do need to do better in communicating and engaging our families and our students. 13,000 responses, though is generous, is not sufficient for us to be able to make broad findings. Nevertheless, I think part of our commitment to transparency is saying, here's what you said, thank you for saying it. And I think that will encourage people to be able to know that we're not only just hiding results, but we're acting on them.
Perfect. And I want to make one other comment. In breaking the link, one of the things that we've looked at is teacher effectiveness. And I know that that's been more than difficult to measure this year in the situation that we're in. So you mentioned that we've got increased AP access and I'm blanking on the other initiative that we've used from our Breaking the Link report to increase. So is teacher effectiveness, is that something that we're in the midst of now that may not be one of the 7 things that you're actively studying now? Could you just speak to that?
Sure. Part of our work, and as we roll out this curriculum and the targeted grades, and we'll be expanding grades for English language arts and mathematics, is to be able to support our teachers in being able to teach that curriculum so there's less slippage between what is the written curriculum that we purchase and receive and what students actually experience, that taught or experienced curriculum.
Okay.
And so Mr. Kingsley is co-leading that work, and we're working to support teachers throughout the school year as well as prior to the school year to be able to help make sure we're delivering that curriculum with integrity and excellence.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Ms. Sawyer.
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. I always learn a lot when I hear your presentations, and I appreciate that. I'm really pleased to see the emphasis in looking at racial disparities in our data. And they are hard to look at because they are not what we want to see, but they're there. And the first step in fixing it is acknowledging it. And, you know, your first Breaking the Link sort of ripped the Band-Aid off. And I'm pleased that we're now developing plans. And can you tell me a little bit more about the approach to the disciplinary disproportionality, or at least when we will be hearing more about that? Because I think there are many people who are interested in that. And what, you don't have to tell me what the plan is, but when will we be hearing more about that?
Certainly want to be coming back to you, if not in the month of August, the month of September, to give you a more comprehensive review of kind of what we're doing. We're going to have a series of equity reports as part of Policy 80A. So we want to integrate kind of what we're telling you into those 6 reports that we'll be giving to you annually. But certainly in the month of August or September, we can be able to roll that out comprehensively. It's not going to be a one-shot effort, which is why I wanted to emphasize not just 2020, 21, but 21, 22 as things we phase in. I think also we have a great opportunity to leverage things we're going to get from our own staff, as well as to the equity committee you formed to inform our work. Their findings will be coming to us later this calendar year. And so we can integrate those things as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Strain.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Barnes. So you mentioned it, our friends at SAS and EVOS. I want to go back to the individual school performance dashboards. Is growth currently shown on the performance dashboards that you've published to date or the beta?
Yes, sir, it is. If you were to click on the hyperlink right above school performance grade, you would be able to see for every school in the school district, the ability to see both their letter grade and their EVOS rating. That would be in the aggregate at this point, not by subgroup, but certainly we can work to add that element to it. You'd be able to control for different elements to disaggregate those data across the district.
Right. So if we went into a school, we can see the aggregate score or rating. Which one are you displaying, the score or the rating at this point? Rating being meets, exceeds, etc.
At this point, we're showing the rating.
Okay. And we do have access to the disaggregated data by subgroup, correct?
EVOS data?
Correct.
That I don't believe is present right now on the dashboard, but it is available. So we need to make sure we update our tools to show that.
Right. And so it is published. It's just not available on the dashboard yet, correct? In
That is
terms
correct.
of subgroups. And then in terms of the academic cohorts, are there any plans to share that information? I know that it's not as readily available, but I understand it's used by teachers, potentially up to the principal level. Are there any plans to share that view as well, which is the academic cohorts that, or disaggregated by academic cohort in a school?
Mr. Strain, if I could ask you to clarify what you mean by academic cohort so I answer your question correctly.
Sure. It is the quintiles that we talked about earlier. You were mentioning earlier how your highest flyers are doing, those that are struggling, and each of the quintiles between that are used by SAS to actually calculate growth in the first place.
As they're available currently, those are for internal use by LEA staff. That's not something we have planned on reporting out on. I think certainly our tools can evolve and our thinking can evolve. So I look forward to a continued dialogue about how we can be as transparent as possible with our community.
Okay, look forward to continued conversation, not a conversation, but continued conversation. As you and I
have been talking for a while.
I've
I do
certainly
appreciate
spoken to Dr. Hayes about this and the superintendent about that. But let's bring that discussion to a conclusion. And if you need something, we can certainly advocate for that. But we need to discuss the value of that data, how it can be used and useful at both the district level and in terms of an element of the dashboard.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, Dr. Barnes, yeah, I thank you for this report. I thank you and your team for your work. You know, we as a district, we as a board are very keenly aware of our academic gaps between cohorts and our discipline gaps. And your shop, you know, your team, you are the ones who can help us untangle that with your data. So glad that you're there. I think we're feeling increasing urgency that we need to get this figured out faster, and we need to be more keenly focused on the solutions. And we're only going to do it with your data and with your passion. So thank you for that too. I look forward to continued work. The solutions are out there. We have to use your data to help us get to those solutions.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion from Ms. Sawyer, second from Ms. Marshall. All in favor, please raise your hands and say yes.
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 Yes. Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Let me ask